I have a question not on the homework, but on what some of you just did with Shira. Can I ask about that? When we're
Sure.
talking identifying what the media is, as opposed to describing it with, let's say, a lack or something, you need to be very clear about what it is that you want to shine the light onto. You said something about Havdalah. You have to first recognize it and then do the Havdalah and then bring in the
hmm
R. What's the Havdalah?
Um, it's the question is not off subject, but the answer is off subject. The question is fine. The Baal Shem Tov has an entire approach to tikkun Hamiddot, to transforming our midas, which is called Ha'alot Hamiddot. It's one of the sources of the word elevation for elevation project. And it's not just tikkun Hamiddot, but it's all tikkunim, all transformation of reality. And there's a 3-step process. That's the core of elevation 4, is discussing that point. You probably see me do it with people, but you're just not aware of the steps. So he calls the 3-step process Hachna'a, Havdalah, and Hamtaka.
Right.
This is classic in all of Chassidus. So when the emotion comes up, when the midah comes up, and sometimes it's called Ha'alat HaMachshavas, which is like to elevate destructive thoughts or to elevate destructive feelings, okay? And to heal and elevate them. So the first step is, now the steps before that, if you understand his whole approach, but the first step is to basically realize that something is there, hakara. If ein das havdalah manayin, if we don't have consciousness, if we're not aware that there's a midah that is destructive, if we're not aware there's hihurim or images in my mind that are destructive, we can't fix them, right? There is no process of tikkun. So the first step is obviously to become aware that there's something to fix, not even what it is yet, number one. And there's a me outside of these thoughts. So that's number one. And then the second step in the Baal Shem Tov would be we have to go into the Vekas. We have to draw on the light so that we can do the healing process. So once I'm aware that I'm stuck in this pattern, I'm stuck in this spiral, I'm stuck in this emotion, again, until you're aware there's no you to fix. It's just because that person's such an idiot. That's where I am. Then you go, hey, that person's such an idiot, but they're triggering my fear. Then you go, oh, look, it's the last 4 days. It's really not me trying to problem solve. It's really just being overwhelmed with fear. Now there's a me and now there's fear. Now there's das. Now I can do the tikkun. And then any tikkun I want to do is always going to be more empowered if I can draw some deveka, some light, some blessing, learn some tone, open up. So once I've got that, then I'm in 3 stages, okay? That's where the 3 always had a hidden two makifim, but that's a longer discussion. So now that I've got that, so then this is how it works. The first stage is hachna'a. Hachna'a means to subdue. And that means when the anger is that you're trying to attack in is so overwhelming that every time you think, I have to work on this anger, I have to find this midah, it's just like, why? Because I feel anger. What are you angry? I can't believe she did this and I can't believe to that. Then you start going this whole MMS, this whole Makshava midah spiral. And you come back and say, okay, now I'm going to fix it. What was I fixing? Well, I feel like she did this to me. Yeah, I can't believe she did this. And you go out and out and again. So that means that you can't fix it until you can subdue it. Okay, so the first thing is a technique that you learn to do. There's all ways I'm doing that to people all the time. Is just learn to kind of get it down. Like when I say, one of the times I say to people, where is it in your body? So that's one way of subduing it. He doesn't say that. The Piaseczner talks about feeling in your body, that you can feel it as a rachash or a whisper or a rustle, a movement in the body, depending on how you want to interpret that word in the guf. But sometimes when you take the anger, rather than seeing it as he did this and this, rather as the Piaseczner says, rather going barachash, rather than going into it and getting swamped by it, we go around it. That's what he says. We just kind of see there's the general feeling of anger rather than here's the program of all the things I'm angry about. So that's a mechanism of hachna'a, because rather than being overwhelmed by all the data within it, I'm subduing it. I'm taking it out of mehihurim. I'm taking it out of beliefs. I'm taking it out of all the stuff coming up, and I'm just seeing it as a core energy point ball by itself. You got that? So now there's me, and the me is quite expanded, and it is something intense that I have to deal with. But the difference, this I can deal with. This I can perform a an operation and a tuaka, and I can do a process with. But when it's doing this and this, then my das is overwhelmed. I don't have the godless das, the full capacity to process and heal. So that's the first step, hachna'a. You got that? Hachna'a, to subdue the energy, number one. And then number two is havdalah. So according to the Baal Shem Tov, I mean, this is a very deep subject. It's worth always talking about every year or two. The way that we heal any middah, what is any middah in its core? Any middah in its core, any emotion which is destructive in its core is really a healthy, holy emotion, which has gone into business for itself. That's what a klippa is. It's something which, anger is positive when it's an expression of the divine soul. It has a force, it has an energy, it has a will, it can overcome negativity and resistance. That's very positive. Lust for pleasure, the desire for pleasure when integrated into higher consciousness is a desire for divine pleasure. But it's a desire for divine pleasure. It desires, it wants to pursue divine pleasure. Therefore, it wants to learn Torah. It wants to keep Shabbos because it wants to, that's a wonderful thing. But when a destructive desire, a destructive emotion, that's what we call the process of shvira, of breaking, shvira sekelim, is when it falls out of its integrated state and sets up business for itself. I want desire for desire's sake. I want lust for pleasure. And if I hurt 25 people along the way, I've heard this woman, as long as I get my pleasure out of it, doesn't really matter. It's the most awful thing to say out loud, but that's the core of it, right? And I want anger, and even if I destroy the world, I'm going to destroy the world because of anger, right? So every destructive emotion, which is most of our emotions, is in truth something holy when integrated, but something broken, destructive when lacking integration. So the healing is when what's the process of healing? First, I have to see what it is, and then I have to identify what is its good expression as opposed to its destructive expression. And that's the process of rachamim. Rachamim always means to see the potential good hidden within something. That's what compassion means. Compassion always means, have compassion on someone means to see them not as they are, but as they could and should be. And that's what arouses compassion. So the second state of havdalah is, well, now that I see there's anger, now that I see there's lust, now that I see that there's fear, here's the important part. The non-Hasidic texts often discuss this idea of destroying a middah, of we have to destroy our negative emotions. So Hasidus says you can't destroy or eliminate a negative emotion because every emotion has as its core a nitzatz, a spark, which is divinity. And you can't destroy divinity. Therefore, if you try and destroy your anger will always come back and hurt you. If you have a lot of fear in your life, your fear is necessarily part of the soul. If you desire pleasure, the desire for pleasure is necessarily part of your soul. You can't destroy your desire for pleasure because there's divinity within it, and you can't destroy divinity. So all you can do is rechannel divinity, reharness divinity, refocus divinity. Now, the third stage, which is called amtaka, is sweetening. And I'm going to jump to this because then you'll understand better the second stage, is when you take the fallen spark of the desire, but the goodness within it, and you reintegrate that back into your divine soul and divine awareness. You got that? But the secret is that divine soul and divine awareness cannot integrate negativity. It can't integrate it can't integrate the destructiveness of the shell. The mystics would say in the same way that when you eat a nut, you break off the shell. First you break off the shell, then you take the nut, then you eat the nut, but you don't eat the shell because you can't consume and you can't digest the shell. So the spiritual, the vina of devekus, of chachma, of higher consciousness, if you will, doesn't integrate the negativity. It reintegrates positivity after the negativity has been separated from it. So first you peel the fruit, and then you throw away the peel, and then you eat the fruit, and then you are satiated. So with that in mind, the first stage is hachna. First of all, you become aware. Im ein das havdalah and we return to das. Second of all, you access the vekas and light. Now you have the power to pull off the wonderful move you're going to do. Then 1, 2, 3, if you push down the overwhelming thoughts of it, you focus on the core of it. And when you see the core of it, then what you want to do is you want to make the distinction. The distinction is that core really has two parts, an outer part and an inner part. If it is anger, says the Baal Shem Tov, Rather than saying I have to negate the anger, if it's lust, what's the desire? Lust, the desire for pleasure. So rather than going, oh, that's disgusting, what I look is the desire for pleasure. I make Havdalah. Havdalah means you peel the fruit. Havdalah means you peel the shell. Havdalah means that you remember and identify and recognize what is the good within this. And when you do that, then you can take off the destructive part of it through recognition. Hey, I don't want to act in that lustful way. That's going to hurt people. It's going to hurt myself. That I'm going to create shame and embarrassment. That's going to lead to something, a terrible outcome, which is not who I am. And then you're reducing and separating, reducing and separating. And who am I? I want to take true pleasure, spiritual pleasure, pleasure that is good and healthy and integrates ultimate divine pleasure. And then you're kind of drawing out the good, and then you oscillate. But wait, I don't want to get distorted negative pleasure. I don't want to identify with that. That's not who I am. That's not what I represent. So now you're peeling the shell, making that distinction. And when you suddenly do that, then you suddenly feel that the negativity is gone, and then this holy thing is there. And a lot of people stop the therapy there, but that's not ready for the best part. Then it should be oila v'nichlal. Then it's transmuted. And at that moment, it rises up within you, and you allow it and you invite it back to come and reintegrate with your das, and that's called das agadol, where your das and your higher consciousness, your devekas, your soul, now expands because it's had a great spark that's been missing for literally thousands of years, come and return and reintegrate to it. And your soul suddenly feels ecstatic, and you suddenly feel this bliss of pleasure, or this bliss of, if it was fear you were dealing with, you feel this bliss of awe, of awesomeness, of epic fear, divine awareness, right? And whatever you had before in a low level suddenly returns after thousands of years of exile. And that's why we're in the world, to have these problems, to have na, to be makniya, to do havdalah, and to reintegrate. And then suddenly that's reintegrated back into your consciousness, and you become not just healthier because you've overcome that, but more holier. Why? Because you expanded the gavul of kedusha. That's what it's called. You've expanded your soul to now reach down and reach back into the heart and re-own that territory and re-own that power and reintegrate that power. And it's a very extraordinary experience. And you feel that more with you in your life. And now you have your fear, but it's an awesome fear. It's got boundaries. It makes distinctions. It's protecting your soul in a dynamic, healthy way. So these are the three stages. First, you're stopping the noise and reducing it back to its core. Then you're making the distinction and peeling it. And now you have the thing, which is the holy spark by itself, which now is open to be fully spiritually digested and spiritually transmuted and elevated and reintegrated. And now your soul can fully expand out further into you. And the more we do that with the Abba and Fesa, all the dimensions of our heart, all our fear, all our lust, all our doubt, all our ego, all our pain, all our shame, or our anger, and everything is there. The more, rather than those places blocking off and sabotaging our higher consciousness, our source, our soul, those places themselves are like the soul buying real estate, more in our heart, more in our body. It causes hashra to shechina. Then the soul can actually come down and be more present in our heart, giving us more energy, more love, more passion, more direction, more focus, more healthy boundaries, which opens up further and further into Ruach HaKodesh, divine intuition and deeper insight and more loving, healthy relationships with people, because the heart has been reclaimed by the soul and becomes a home for the soul. Right? That's Kisva Maluach Lebecha, that the tablets of our heart have now been written on with the divine words. And that's the beginning of, real next level living experience, because we've transformed the darkness of our heart to be a vessel for light with the same desires themselves that were sabotaging, destroying us. They themselves have now become a home for divine revelation. And divinity here means our divine soul, rather than our emotions, our desires contradicting our soul and our intellect. They become incredibly powerful tools to express and draw down and manifest the desires of our soul. And that's what it means to be a tzaddik, and that's what it means to be a Baal Tefillin, a spiritual master. So there you have it.
Thank you. The part of the process that you showed Heidi with the hitting on the chest, what part of the process would that be? Would that be part of Hachna?
That's part of Hachna, and you can use it ultimately as a part of Havdalah, but in this process we're using it as Hachna, which is just releasing that. There's a lot of things in Chassidus and Kabbalah, and also just in Halacha, and for sure in the Talmud. I mean, tshuva is done by beating of the heart, right? So that we've discussed this before. that whenever you beat the heart, what you're doing is the idea is you're not beating yourself up. No one holds it like you're actually hitting yourself or supposed to do damage. It's either a very light tap, because that's called your soid bina here. Without going into it, this is the place in our when our consciousness meets our heart and the desires. That's why the heart is there. And when we tap it, what we're doing is releasing all. We're releasing light of the chasadim and gevurim of das, of moichen. We're releasing an energy of our consciousness, which comes down and floods us and releases it on that place. As we do this below, we're stimulating that light and energy in our soul above to come down and heal that. So with that in mind, part of tshuva is drawing back the energy, tshuva, returning the energy of our soul that we invested, that got injected, that got invested in external things, in our body, in our heart, in our words, in people, in the energy, in the avira, in the atmosphere. And therefore, by speaking that out in holiness and regretting that in our consciousness and drawing that light down and releasing and taking the responsibility, then I'm drawing that up and out. Not just my words, not just my emotions, not just in my body, but even the effect of negative, destructive things to other people and the physical environment, to physical matter, to the greater consciousness, the greater environment. I've rechanneled the energy in a destructive way, and now I'm drawing it all back by doing that. And that allows an energetic empowerment to the tshuva process, which there's angels, there's other forces that get released and come back to us and help us release that, empowers us to release that. And that's also very much a part of the hakna'a and the havdalah, because the more I disengage from the identity of the destructive act and the destructive feeling, and the more I don't just do that myself, the more I allow that energy to, if I, God forbid, pick up something and throw it at a person, then that thing that I've thrown has also become invested with the negativity. The house where I was angry the walls become invested in that. Our actions impinge on the physical world. This is all the way through Tanakh. This is all the way why the times of Noah, when they lived in a very impure way, where the animals and the earth got destroyed. And our sages say that the flood had to not just kill the animals, but kill the ground, 3 tefachim, because the ground became contaminated with negative human consciousness. Holy human consciousness elevates the environment and everything we affect around us, and destructive human consciousness contaminates that environment. So when we do tshuva, we don't just turn ourselves around, we turn around all the levels of everything we affected in the world. So that's all part of that process. Next question.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't know if this sounds simplistic or stupid after what you explained, but I think I'm confused. What is the nitzos in doubt? Like, we talk about how we need to destroy Amalek, that Amalek, brought doubt into the world, Safek, and we have to destroy it at all costs. So what's the nitzos there?
I wouldn't at all probably call it a stupid question, but it's a question I bet you can answer. And the answer, the way you formulate the answer to all these questions is, when can you see doubt used in a positive way? When can you see doubt used in a holy way? Well, now it's easy, right? It's all how you frame it. And how would you answer that, Shira?
Well, I mean, you could use it as the reverse, that any time that there's any doubt that Hashem is trusting, that Hashem is running the show, that I doubt that rather than the reality that Hashem is there and guiding everything. Or
I see, it's a double negative. Okay, fine. If you trusted everyone with 100% faith, that could be extremely damaging and destructive. That means the person says you're an idiot for believing in God or truth.
Right.
But you have to have the capacity to say, well, maybe what he's saying isn't 100% accurate. That's a form of doubt.
Right.
So doubt can protect you. I mean, without going to overly painful examples, there's many people that have even rabbis that they brought up with rabbis in schools, and those rabbis can cause trauma to children for all kinds of terrible reasons, right? And for that person to heal, they have to doubt the authority of that person, because as long as they're under the authority, then they can't they can't acknowledge what's being done to them, and they can't get out and empower their own selves to make changes, right? So the capacity to doubt is a necessary part from becoming psychologically unstuck from falsehood. How's that for a good sentence? Okay, so there's a very positive doubt. Rav Nachman talks about the positivity of forgetfulness. You know, some people, Rav Nachman would say, you know, they're like, you know, to be a religious Jew, be a Torah Jew. I rarely use the word religious Jew. To be a Torah Jew, I have to learn a lot of Torah and remember a lot of laws and remember a lot of stories and remember a lot of philosophies. And I have a terrible memory. So Rav Nachman says, why is having a bad memory a good thing? Right? Can anyone guess? What's a holy form of forgetfulness? Anyone guess?
Definitely forgetting bad images, and definitely, you know, hurts that people have done to you and all of that.
Yeah, that's true. Wonderful examples. Rav Nachman gives another example, which is like, you know, when people do bad things in their past and they remember the bad things in their past, they don't let themselves get over it and move on, right? And Rav Nachman says, Baruch Hashem for forgetfulness, because you can let the past be the past and you can move on, right? If you got stuck, if you were living with your past as your present, even though you've done tshuva, it'd be hard to realize that that's not you. Let the past be the past. So, you know, all these things are wonderful things if channeled in the right way. Is that interesting? Aliza, did you have your questions answered from before?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I think just part of the process is working through these things in a way that's complete. I find myself doing this process over and over again, but I know that it's just different levels of the same thing. It just sometimes feels like the same thing over and over.
Right. That both those things are true. And then different times you'll see, like, different times I work with people on different things. Like sometimes just to get a person down to 0 is enough, right? And that person may not know how to get to the Vegas. You don't want to make them feel there's one more step and that they failed. They've done great, and that they've taken away the trauma. They haven't accessed the spiritual integration. But halavai, we would all just take away our trauma. We could all live in a neutral state. That's a beautiful beginning. And so sometimes you're working on different things and different steps for different people at different times. And sometimes I'm illustrating a certain thing. So I won't take a person 3 steps forward because I've illustrated the value of what we're doing there, right? But in general, if you want to see a bigger overview, these are some of the things we're discussing. It's important to know that. And it's important to just realize how deep those 3 steps, what the Baal Shem Tov is saying. I mean, if you understand of that, all of the transformation of every company, every organization, of all of the physical world, of all the everything actually goes on a 3-step model. That 3-step model is a very philosophical thing. Can, you know, from a Torah perspective, can we learn wisdom from non-Jews or non-spiritual sources? And the answer is yes, if you follow the 3 steps as well. So I mean, and everything in the world is actually good if you follow those 3 steps. A person can even take the darkness in the world of, without naming names, of the most destructive people in history, the most destructive things in the world, and actually see divinity in it if you follow those 3 steps. And those 3 steps are what all the Kabbalists do when they connect everything in the world. It's what called Yichudim, connect everything in the physical world, everything in the spiritual world, everything in the world of politics, everything in the world of music, of secular knowledge, of wisdom. Every human being you meet, no matter how grotesque or stuck, if you strip off the external, you focus on the value that they are, what light, you know, even destructive things. If you take communism, or if you take, I don't know, any destructive political thing, there's also good in it. If you take away the negative, find the spark. What's the spark of truth? And then see what that's revealing. You know, that's the way, that's the pattern, these 3 steps of how you bring everything back to its source. So this 3-step process of Hafna'a, Havdalah, Hamtaka isn't only psychological. It's an absolute 3-step rule of all, drawing everything back to Hashem, revealing divinity in all things. That's just its psychological application. You know, that's many classes unto itself and a wonderful discussion. But today, and here in Elevation, we're focusing on the psychological transformational elements of things. So that's the explanation of it. But it's definitely worth exploring those 3 steps as a vehicle to understand everything in reality and connect it to its source. That's when life gets interesting. Fine. Questions?